The massive alien ship floated in the dark space above the planet Kepler 442b. The ship was bigger than any human city, with metal walls that gleamed under the light of distant stars. Inside the war room, alien beings from across the galaxy had gathered around a huge table made of some kind of glowing crystal. Commander Vexstar stood at the head of the table. He was tall, maybe 8 feet, with 4 powerful arms and skin that looked like green and blue scales. His yellow eyes moved slowly across the room as he looked at each alien leader. The room smelled strange, like burning metal mixed with something sweet that humans would never recognize. To his right sat General Crixana from the Hive Collective. She looked like a giant insect with 6 legs and wings that buzzed softly when she was excited. Her black eyes were made up of thousands of tiny parts that could see in all directions at once. Next to her was the Luminari representative, a being made of pure energy that lived inside a clear crystal container. It glowed with white and blue light that pulsed like a heartbeat. The Depth Dwellers had sent Captain Morgul, who needed to sit in a special tank filled with purple liquid that smelled like the ocean. His skin was gray and wet, and he had gills on his neck that opened and closed as he breathed the strange fluid. In the corner of the room, almost forgotten, sat the only human present. Captain Jake Morrison was 52 years old, with gray hair and deep lines around his eyes. His face was covered with scars from many battles, and his left hand was missing 2 fingers from a plasma blast 6 months ago. He wore simple gray clothes that marked him as a prisoner, but his back was straight and his eyes were alert. The aliens had captured Morrison during the battle for Europa Station. They kept him alive because he knew things about human military tactics that had surprised them in previous fights. He was useful, like a tool they could use when they needed to understand how humans thought about war. Commander Vexstar touched a control on the table, and the air above them filled with moving pictures. The images showed human soldiers on Earth, marching in formation, driving tanks and flying aircraft. The technology looked primitive compared to what the aliens had. "Look at these creatures," Vexstar said in his deep voice that sounded like rocks grinding together. "They call themselves the dominant species of their planet, but observe their limitations." The hologram zoomed in on a human soldier. The man was young, maybe 20 years old, carrying a rifle that shot metal bullets instead of energy beams. His armor was made of simple materials that would not stop even the weakest alien weapon. "General," Crixana made a sound like clicking and buzzing. That was the insect equivalent of laughter. "These soft-skinned bipeds think they can resist the combined might of 4 star-spanning civilizations? Their weapons are primitive, their armor is laughable, and their tactical doctrine is centuries behind ours." The pictures changed to show human cities: New York, London, Tokyo, Moscow. The buildings were tall but made of simple materials like steel and glass. The aliens could see millions of humans moving through the streets, going about their daily lives, completely unaware that death was coming from the stars. "Our intelligence reports are complete," Vexstar continued. "Humans require 8 hours of sleep every day. They must consume food and water regularly, or they become weak and die. They suffer from psychological conditions called fear and trauma that make them unable to fight effectively." Captain Morgul spoke from his tank, his voice making bubbles in the purple liquid. "The aquatic assault teams report that humans cannot even survive in water for more than a few minutes. How can such fragile creatures pose any threat to our battle-hardened warriors?" The Luminari representative pulsed brighter, which meant it was amused. "Our analysis shows that human soldiers frequently break down under stress. They experience something called panic, which makes them run away from battle. Some even refuse to fight their own species in conflicts. This psychological weakness will make conquest simple." Around the table, the alien leaders made their various sounds of agreement and amusement. They had conquered dozens of worlds before, and none had given them serious trouble. The humans would be no different. Morrison sat quietly in his corner, his face showing nothing. He had learned over the past 6 months that it was better to listen than to speak. The aliens would tell him things they thought were not important, not knowing that every piece of information was valuable to someone who understood warfare. The human military structure is inefficient, General Crixana continued. They have different branches that often compete with each other instead of working together. Their Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines waste resources on duplicate functions. Our unified command structure will overwhelm their confused leadership. The hologram showed human military bases around the world. The aliens had been watching Earth for 2 years, studying human defenses and military capabilities. They knew where every major weapon was stored, where the command centers were located, and how human communications worked. Phase 1 of the invasion will target their major population centers, Vextar explained. New York, London, Tokyo, and Moscow will be captured within the first 6 hours. Phase 2 will eliminate their military command structure. Phase 3 will secure their industrial centers and food production facilities. Captain Morgul made a gurgling sound that was laughter. The humans have no defense against our plasma weapons. Their primitive metal bullets cannot penetrate our energy shields. Their aircraft are too slow to catch our fighters. This will be easier than the conquest of the crystal worlds. The Luminari representative dimmed slightly, then brightened again. Psychological warfare will be equally effective. Once they see their major cities fall, human resistance will collapse. Our analysis shows that humans have strong emotional attachments to their offspring and mates. Threatening these bonds will ensure rapid surrender. Morrison's jaw tightened slightly, but he kept his expression neutral. He had seen what these aliens could do. Europa Station had been home to 50,000 people, and the aliens had destroyed it in less than an hour. But there were things about humans that these creatures did not understand, things that did not show up in their intelligence reports. The human concept of honor is limited, General Crixana said. They will surrender to save their own lives. Unlike the warrior cultures we have faced before, humans have no tradition of fighting to the death. They are, essentially, a species of cowards who have succeeded through technology rather than courage. The other aliens made sounds of agreement. They had read human history and seen the wars humans fought against each other. They saw the surrenders, the retreats, the peace treaties. They did not understand what they were really looking at. Commander Vextar turned to Morrison. You have been silent, human. What is your assessment of your species' defensive capabilities? Morrison looked up slowly. His blue eyes were calm, but there was something in them that might have warned the aliens if they had known how to read. Human expressions. You'll find out soon enough, he said quietly. The aliens made their various sounds of amusement again. The human was clearly trying to maintain some kind of dignity in the face of certain defeat. It was almost admirable in a pathetic way. Very well, Vextar said. The invasion will commence in 3 standard cycles. Our forces will demonstrate the futility of resistance, and this human will witness the swift conquest of his homeworld. The meeting ended with the alien leaders confident and excited. They had overwhelming technological superiority, numerical advantage, and complete intelligence on human capabilities. The invasion of Earth would be a simple matter of applying sufficient force in the right places. As the aliens filed out of the room, Morrison remained in his corner. He thought about his daughter Amy, who was a Marine lieutenant stationed in California. He thought about his brother Steve, who ran a small security company in Chicago. He thought about millions of humans who had no idea what was coming, but mostly he thought about things the aliens had not bothered to study. Things that did not show up in intelligence reports about weapons and military bases. Things that made humans different from every other species these aliens had conquered. The aliens would learn soon enough. Morrison almost felt sorry for them. 3 weeks passed in the cold darkness of space. The alien armada had grown to massive size as ships from 4 different civilizations joined together. 500,000 warships now floated in perfect formation above Earth, their hulls gleaming like deadly stars against the black void. Inside those ships waited 50 million alien soldiers, all armed with weapons that could melt steel and wearing armor that could stop Human bullets like raindrops. Captain Jake Morrison stood at the small window in his cell, looking down at the blue and white planet below. Earth looked so peaceful from this distance, so quiet and beautiful. He knew that in a few hours, that peace would be shattered forever. Down in the command center, Commander Vexstar studied the final battle plans. His forearms moved across the control panels as he checked the status of each invasion force. The Hive Collective had contributed 200,000 insect warriors, each one capable of fighting for days without rest. The Luminari brought energy beings that could pass through solid matter and attack from within human buildings. The Depth Dwellers had adapted their aquatic soldiers to fight on land, giving them powerful exoskeletons that made them nearly invulnerable. All forces report ready, General Crixana announced. Her wings buzzed with excitement as she anticipated the coming battle. The human military has shown no signs of detecting our presence. Their primitive radar systems cannot penetrate our stealth technology. The Luminari representative pulsed brighter. Surface scans confirm that human defensive positions remain unchanged. They have not moved their weapons or reinforced their cities. They are completely unprepared for our assault. Commander Vexstar allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned. The humans would be caught completely off guard, and their resistance would crumble within hours. "Begin the invasion," he ordered. The first wave of alien ships dropped out of orbit like falling meteors. They moved faster than anything humans had ever seen, their engines leaving trails of blue fire across the morning sky. Air raid sirens began to wail in cities around the world as human radar operators struggled to understand what they were seeing. In New York City, people looked up from their morning coffee to see alien ships descending through the clouds above Manhattan. The ships were enormous, each one the size of a city block, and they moved with impossible grace despite their bulk. Plasma beams lanced down from the ships, cutting through human aircraft like they were made of paper. The first alien soldiers landed in Central Park at exactly 0800 hours local time. They were Hive Collective warriors, each one 7 feet tall with armor that sparkled like diamonds. Their weapons fired bursts of energy that could vaporize a human soldier instantly. They moved in perfect coordination like parts of a single organism, advancing through the park with deadly efficiency. Human police officers and National Guard troops rushed to meet them, but their bullets bounced harmlessly off the alien armor. Within minutes, the aliens had secured the entire park and were advancing into the surrounding streets. The same scene played out in London, Tokyo, and Moscow. Alien forces landed in the heart of each city, their superior technology overwhelming human defenders. Military bases around the world tried to launch counterattacks, but their jets and helicopters were destroyed before they could even reach the alien ships. From his cell, Morrison watched the invasion unfold on the monitors that the aliens had left running. They wanted him to see how helpless his species was, how quickly human resistance was crumbling. The early footage seemed to support their confidence. "See how your species flees before our might," General Crixana taunted as she visited Morrison's cell. "Your myths of human military prowess are just that, myths? Your soldiers run like frightened animals when faced with superior force." Morrison said nothing. He watched the screens carefully, studying the patterns of retreat and advance. The aliens saw panic and defeat, but Morrison saw something else. He saw human forces falling back in organized groups, not random flight. He saw civilians being evacuated in orderly fashion, not mindless stampedes. He saw the beginning of something. The aliens did not understand. By the second day, the aliens controlled large sections of all 4 target cities. Their ground forces had advanced steadily, crushing human resistance wherever they found it. Alien commanders reported that human military units were retreating or surrendering as expected, but then strange reports began to filter back to the command ship. Human soldiers who had supposedly retreated were reappearing behind alien lines. Supply convoys were being attacked by small groups of humans who seemed to appear out of nowhere and then vanish again. Communication arrays were being sabotaged by people who should have been cowering in their homes. This is not the behavior we expected from a conquered species, Captain Morgul reported from his tank. Our psychological profiles indicated that humans would seek safety in designated refugee areas. Instead, they are dispersing into the urban environment and continuing to resist. Commander Vexstar studied the tactical displays with growing concern. The invasion was proceeding, but not as smoothly as planned. Human resistance was supposed to collapse after the first show of alien superiority. Instead, it seemed to be adapting. An evolving dot in Manhattan. Lieutenant Colonel Amy Parker crouched in the ruins of a subway station with 30 Marines and twice as many civilians. Her father had taught her about war, about how to fight when everything seemed hopeless. Now she was putting those lessons to use. The aliens are strong, but they're not smart, she told her mixed group of soldiers and citizens. They fight like machines, always the same way. They expect us to stand up and fight them face to face, but we're not going to do that. Amy's force had been moving through the subway tunnels for hours, using the underground network to avoid alien patrols. They had already destroyed 2 alien supply trucks and captured enough energy weapons to arm half their group. More importantly, they had rescued dozens of trapped civilians and guided them to safety. "Ma'am," said Sergeant Tim Walsh, a young Marine who had never seen combat before this week, "the aliens have plasma shields. Our bullets don't hurt them." "How are we supposed to fight?" Amy smiled grimly. "We don't fight their strengths, Walsh. We fight their weaknesses. Those shields protect them from energy weapons and bullets, but they don't help much when a building falls on top of them." Similar scenes were playing out in cities around the world. Human forces were learning to use the urban environment against the invaders. They collapsed buildings to trap alien units, flooded areas to disable their equipment, and used the maze of streets and alleys to launch hit-and-run attacks. The aliens had planned for conventional warfare. The humans were fighting an entirely different kind of battle. Instead of meeting alien strength with strength, they were using speed, stealth, and cunning to strike where the aliens were weakest. By the third day, alien casualties were mounting. The conquest that was supposed to take hours was now entering its 4th day with no end in sight. Even more disturbing, human resistance was actually growing stronger as scattered military units found each other and began to coordinate their efforts. General Crixena was becoming increasingly agitated. "The humans are exhibiting irrational behavior patterns," she reported. "They continue fighting even when victory is impossible. Some have been observed sacrificing themselves to eliminate single alien soldiers. This does not conform to any logical military doctrine." The Luminari representative flickered nervously. "Our forces report that human civilians are constructing barriers and traps throughout the occupied areas. They are using primitive materials in ways that interfere with our advanced technology. This was not anticipated in our battle plans." "Commander." Vexstar felt the first stirrings of doubt. The invasion was still proceeding, but it was costing far more than expected. His superiors were beginning to ask uncomfortable questions about the unexpected. Resistance. Morrison was brought to the command center more frequently now as the aliens sought to understand what was happening. "Explain this behavior," Vexstar demanded, showing him footage of human soldiers fighting to the death rather than surrendering. Morrison looked at the screen for a long moment. "You want to know what you're up against?" he said quietly. "Every human down there has grown up on stories of the Alamo, Thermopylae, and the Warsaw Ghetto. We don't surrender. We don't retreat. We make you pay for every inch." The alien officers exchanged uncertain glances. These were names they had not encountered in their intelligence reports. Commander Vexstar demanded an explanation of these historical references. Morrison simply smiled. "You wouldn't understand. It's a human thing." But as the invasion entered its 4th day, the aliens were beginning to realize that they had seriously underestimated their enemy. The humans were not fighting like any species they had conquered before. They were fighting like they had nothing left to lose, and that made them more dangerous than any advanced technology. By the 5th day of the invasion, the alien command structure was in chaos. What should have been a swift conquest had turned into a grinding nightmare that consumed resources and lives at an alarming rate. Every city block had become a battleground, every building a potential fortress, and every human civilian a possible threat. Commander Vextar stood before the main tactical display, his forearms moving frantically across the controls as he tried to make sense of the reports flooding in from the surface. Red indicators showed alien casualties mounting by the hour. Yellow warnings indicated supply lines under constant attack. Most disturbing of all, the green zones that should have shown secured territory were flickering back to contested status, as human forces continued to operate behind alien lines. "Status report," he demanded, his voice carrying the strain of 5 days without rest. General Crixina's wings buzzed with agitation as she delivered the grim news. Casualty reports from all 4 target cities show losses exceeding projections by 300%. The 2nd Hive Regiment was completely eliminated in the Manhattan subway system when humans collapsed multiple tunnel sections simultaneously. The 3rd Energy Battalion reports that human forces have learned to use reflective surfaces to redirect their own plasma weapons back at them. The Luminari representative pulsed erratically, its light flickering between dim and bright. "Our forces report that humans have established underground networks throughout all target cities. These networks were not detected during our reconnaissance missions. They appear to have been prepared for exactly this type of invasion." Captain Morgul's voice bubbled through the liquid in his tank. "The aquatic assault teams have been forced to withdraw from the flooded areas of New York. Human forces have been using the city's water systems against us, channeling electrical current through the water to disrupt our equipment. Many of our soldiers have been electrocuted." Vextar felt something he had never experienced before in his long military career: doubt. The humans were not behaving like any conquered species he had ever encountered. They were not seeking safety or surrender. Instead, they seemed to be getting more dangerous as the invasion continued. Far below on the surface, Lieutenant Colonel Amy Parker crouched in the ruins of what had once been a department store in Manhattan. Around her, 30 Marines and 50 civilians worked together to prepare for the next phase of their resistance. The group had grown from the original 30 people to over 80 as they rescued trapped civilians and incorporated surviving military personnel. "Report," Amy ordered as Sergeant Tim Walsh returned from a scouting mission. "The aliens have established a command post in Times Square," Walsh reported. "Heavy defenses, energy shields, the works. But they're using the same defensive pattern they used in Central Park. They don't seem to learn from their mistakes." Amy nodded. The aliens were technologically superior, but they were also predictable. They followed the same tactics in every situation, as if they were programmed machines instead of thinking soldiers. Humans, on the other hand, were adapting constantly. "What about the evacuation tunnels?" she asked. "Clear and operational," replied Maria Santos, a subway worker who had joined their group on the 2nd day. "The aliens still haven't figured out how extensive the underground system really is. We can move people from Manhattan to Queens without them ever knowing." Amy smiled grimly. The aliens had studied human cities from above, but they had never bothered to look underneath. The vast network of subways, sewers, utility tunnels, and basements that ran beneath every major city was invisible to their sensors. Humans had been using these hidden passages to move supplies, evacuate civilians, and launch surprise attacks. "Any word from the other cells?" Amy asked. "Radio contact with Chicago, Los Angeles, and Miami groups," reported Corporal Don Miller, who was monitoring communications. "They're all reporting similar success with hit-and-run tactics. The aliens are having trouble in every major city, not just here." This was perhaps the most important development. The alien invasion had been planned to crush human resistance through overwhelming force applied to key population centers. But humans were not fighting as separate city-states. They were sharing information, coordinating attacks, and learning from each other's successes and failures. Amy looked around at her mixed group of soldiers and civilians. There was Mrs. Chun, An elderly Chinese woman who had survived the Japanese occupation of Shanghai and was now teaching young Marines how to make improvised explosives. There was Bobby Martinez, a teenager from the Bronx who knew every tunnel and hiding place in the city. There was Dr. Sarah Kim, a surgeon who was keeping wounded fighters alive with medical supplies scavenged from abandoned hospitals. "Listen up, everyone," Amy said. "We've received new intelligence about alien weaknesses. Their armor is nearly invulnerable to our weapons, but it has limitations. The power source is located in the back, protected by lighter shielding. Their helmets have a small ventilation system that can be blocked with the right materials." The group leaned in closer as Amy continued. "More importantly, we've learned that they have trouble with rapid temperature changes. Their equipment malfunctions when exposed to extreme cold followed by extreme heat. We can use this." This intelligence had come from other resistance cells around the world. In Moscow, human fighters had discovered that alien weapons stopped working properly in sub-zero temperatures. In Tokyo, defenders had learned that steam from broken pipes could disrupt alien communications. In London, resistance forces had found that alien armor became brittle when exposed to certain chemical compounds above them in the alien command ship. Morrison was being questioned again. The aliens brought him to the command center every few hours now, desperate to understand why their invasion was failing so badly. "Your species should have surrendered by now," Vextar said, his voice carrying frustration and anger. "We have superior technology, superior numbers, and superior training, yet human resistance continues to grow stronger. Explain this." Morrison looked at the tactical displays showing the ongoing battles. Red indicators showed alien casualties in the thousands. Yellow warnings indicated supply problems as human forces continued to attack convoys and supply depots. Most telling of all, the areas marked as secured were shrinking instead of expanding. "You made a mistake," Morrison said calmly. "You assumed that humans would fight like you do. Stand up, face each other, and let the stronger side win." "But that's not how we fight." He pointed to a display showing Manhattan, where dozens of small skirmishes were taking place simultaneously. "You see chaos, we see coordination. Every one of those attacks is part of a larger plan. Every human fighter down there is thinking, adapting, sharing information with others." General Krixena made her clicking sound of anger. "Impossible. Your species lacks the hive mind necessary for such coordination. Individual humans cannot possibly coordinate complex operations across multiple locations." Morrison almost laughed. "You're right. We don't have a hive mind. We have something better. We have millions of individual minds all working toward the same goal. You can't predict what we'll do next because we don't know what we'll do next. We make it up as we go along." The alien officers exchanged confused glances. This concept was foreign to them. The Hive collective thought as one organism. The Luminari shared a collective consciousness. The Depth Dwellers followed strict hierarchical commands. None of them understood how individual creativity could be more effective than organized planning. "Furthermore," Morrison continued, "you're fighting the wrong enemy. You came here to fight our military, but you're fighting our entire civilization. Every human civilian you encounter is a potential soldier. Every human child has grown up hearing stories about heroes who fought impossible odds and won. On the surface, this was proving to be true. Human resistance was not limited to military personnel. Construction workers were building barricades and traps. Engineers were sabotaging alien equipment. Teachers were organizing civilian evacuations. Even children were serving as messengers and scouts. The aliens had planned for a military conquest, but they found themselves facing an entire species that refused to be conquered. More disturbing, human forces were beginning to capture alien technology and turn it against the invaders. In Chicago, Colonel Steve Barnes led a desperate assault on an alien supply depot. His force of regular Army soldiers, National Guard troops, and armed civilians had been planning the attack for 3 days. They had studied alien patrol patterns, identified weaknesses in their defenses, and waited for the perfect moment to strike. The attack came at dawn, when alien forces were changing shifts and their attention was divided. Human fighters emerged from sewers, rooftops, and abandoned buildings simultaneously. They used captured alien weapons alongside human explosives, creating a coordinated assault that overwhelmed the depot's defenses. Within 2 hours, Barnes' forces had captured dozens of alien energy weapons, communication devices, and even several pieces of powered armor. More importantly, they had taken 3 alien prisoners and recovered technical manuals that would help human engineers understand how the technology worked. This information was immediately shared with resistance cells around the world through quantum-encrypted networks that the aliens. As the invasion entered its second week, the alien command ship had become a place of constant tension and fear. Reports from the surface grew worse with each passing hour. The conquest that was supposed to take days had now stretched into 2 weeks of grinding urban warfare, and alien casualties had reached catastrophic levels. Commander Vextar stood in his private chambers, staring out at the stars through the massive viewport. His reflection looked back at him, showing the toll that 14 days of constant stress had taken. His scales had lost their shine, his yellow eyes were bloodshot from lack of rest, and his forearms trembled slightly from exhaustion. The door chimed, and General Crixina entered without waiting for permission. Her wings were drooping, and several of her compound eyes had been damaged in a recent attack on an orbital transport. "Commander, we have lost another supply convoy to human raiders. That makes 12 convoys destroyed in the past 3 days. Vextar turned from the window. "How is that possible? Our convoys are escorted by full battle groups. Humans have no weapons capable of threatening our ships. They are not attacking our ships directly," Crixena explained. "They have learned to target the landing zones where supplies are unloaded. They wait until our transports land, then attack with captured weapons and improvised explosives. By the time our forces can respond, the humans have vanished back into their underground networks." The situation was becoming impossible. The alien forces on the surface needed constant supplies of energy cells, replacement parts, and fresh troops. But every supply run was becoming a deadly gamble. Human forces seemed to know exactly when and where the aliens would land, and they were always ready with ambush. "What do our intelligence reports show?" Vextar asked. "That is the problem, Commander. Our intelligence was completely wrong about human capabilities. They told us that humans were individualistic and could not coordinate large-scale operations without centralized command. Instead, we are facing a resistance network that operates with perfect coordination across the entire planet." Crixena activated a holographic display showing the current situation on Earth. Red indicators showed areas of heavy fighting. Yellow zones marked contested territory. Green areas, which should have shown alien control, were almost non-existent. "Look at this," she said, pointing to a cluster of attacks around Chicago. "In the past 6 hours, human forces have struck at 17 different targets simultaneously. Supply depots, communication arrays, patrol routes, and defensive positions. All perfectly timed to maximize damage and minimize their own casualties." Vextar studied the display with growing alarm. This level of coordination should be impossible without advanced technology. How are they communicating? We still do not know. Our best senses cannot detect their communication signals. It is as if they are using some form of technology we have never encountered. The truth was simpler but more frightening than the aliens realized. Humans were not using advanced technology to coordinate their attacks. They were using something far more dangerous: trust, initiative, and the ability to think independently while working toward a common goal. In Manhattan, Lieutenant Colonel Amy Parker was planning the largest coordinated attack of the resistance. Her cell had grown to over 200 fighters, including Marines, civilians, and even several captured alien soldiers who had defected after learning about human determination. "The aliens have established a major command post in the Empire State Building," she explained to her assembled team leaders. "They think the height gives them a tactical advantage, but they've also trapped themselves in a building with limited escape routes." Sergeant Tim Walsh, now a veteran of 2 weeks of urban warfare, studied the building plans. "What about their air support?" They can evacuate by aircraft if we attack, Amy smiled. That's where the other cells come in. Teams in Los Angeles, Chicago, and Miami will launch simultaneous attacks on alien command posts in their cities. The aliens will have to choose which command post to reinforce. They cannot defend them all. This was the key to human resistance strategy. Instead of fighting the aliens' strengths, they forced the aliens to spread their forces thin. Every attack created new problems that required more alien troops to solve. Meanwhile, human forces grew stronger as they captured alien equipment and recruited new fighters. What about casualties? Asked Dr. Sarah Kim, the surgeon who had become the group's medical officer. The aliens will fight desperately to hold their command posts. Amy's expression grew serious. There will be casualties. But we all knew this when we started fighting. The question is not whether we will die, but whether our deaths will mean something. This was perhaps the most difficult concept for the aliens to understand. Human fighters were not afraid of death. They were afraid of meaningless death. As long as their sacrifice served a purpose, as long as it brought victory closer, humans would gladly give their lives. On the command ship, Vexstar was meeting with his senior officers in emergency session. The invasion was failing and his superiors were demanding explanations. Worse, they were threatening to send a new commander to replace him if the situation did not improve immediately. We must break human resistance once and for all, he declared. I am ordering all forces to begin targeting civilian populations directly. If humans will not surrender to save their military, perhaps they will surrender to save their families. The Luminari representative flickered nervously. Commander, our initial psychological profile suggested that humans have strong protective instincts toward their offspring. Threatening civilians may indeed force their surrender. Captain Morgul's voice bubbled with uncertainty. However, our recent observations suggest that human psychology is more complex than we initially understood. Direct threats to civilians may have unintended consequences. Vexstar was past caring about consequences. The decision is made. Begin targeting schools, hospitals, and residential areas. Show the humans that continued resistance will only bring more suffering to their people. It was at this moment that Morrison spoke up from his position in the corner. For 2 weeks, he had remained mostly silent, watching and listening as the aliens grew more desperate. Now he could see that they were about to make a fatal mistake. You really don't understand humans at all, do you? He said quietly. Vexstar turned to face him, his yellow eyes burning with anger and frustration. Explain yourself, human. Morrison stood up slowly, his chains rattling. You think threatening our families will make us surrender. But you've got it backwards. Nothing makes humans more dangerous than threatening the people they love. Impossible, General Crixena clicked. All species have self-preservation instincts. When faced with overwhelming force, they choose survival over continued resistance. Morrison shook his head. Not humans. When you threaten our children, you don't weaken our resolve. You remove the last restraints on our behavior. You turn ordinary people into weapons of pure rage. The alien officers exchanged uncertain glances. This went against everything they knew about military psychology. In their experience, targeting civilian populations always led to rapid surrender. Furthermore, Morrison continued, you've made another mistake. You think we're fighting to win. We're not. We're fighting to survive. And survival doesn't care about your superior technology or your numerical advantages. Vexstar stepped closer to Morrison. You will provide us with intelligence on human resistance operations, or we will begin executing civilian populations to force your surrender. Morrison looked directly into the alien commander's eyes. You still don't get it. Execute 1,000 civilians, and you'll create 10,000 new fighters. Execute 10,000, and you'll turn every human on Earth into your enemy. We don't negotiate with threats to our families. Then what do you suggest? Vexstar demanded. Morrison was quiet for a long moment, then he made his offer. I'll help you understand humans better. I'll explain why your invasion is failing and what you're really facing down there. But first, you're going to let me talk to your ground commanders directly. I want them to hear what I have to say. Vexstar was desperate enough to consider any option. His invasion was failing, his casualties were mounting, and his superiors were losing patience. If the human could provide insight into resistance operations, it might be worth the risk. Very well, he agreed. You will address our field commanders. But if you attempt to provide aid to human forces, you will be executed immediately. Morrison nodded. I understand. But I'm not going to help the humans. I'm going to help you understand what you're really fighting. An hour later, Morrison stood before a holographic assembly of alien field commanders from all 4 invasion zones. These were the officers who had been fighting humans face-to-face for 2 weeks, and their frustration was evident in their postures and expressions. Gentlemen, Morrison began, you've been fighting the wrong war from the beginning. You came here expecting to fight our military. Instead, you're fighting our entire civilization. Commander Thaxel from the London invasion zone spoke first. Human military resistance should have collapsed after we demonstrated our superior technology. Instead, it has grown stronger. This does not match any known behavioral patterns. Morrison smiled grimly. That's because you're not fighting our military anymore. You're fighting our entire. Morrison stood before the holographic assembly of alien field commanders, their faces showing confusion and growing fear. For 2 weeks, these beings had commanded the most advanced military force in the galaxy, yet they were being defeated by what they considered a primitive species. Now they waited to hear explanations that might save their invasion from complete failure. You want to understand why you're losing? Morrison continued, his voice carrying the weight of decades of military experience. It's because you fundamentally misunderstood what humans are. You studied our technology, our military structure, our weapons, but you never studied our history. Commander Thaxel from London leaned forward in his projection. We analyzed thousands of human conflicts. Your species fights among itself constantly. This should have weakened your resistance to external threats. Morrison shook his head. You saw the fighting, but you missed the point. Every war we fought has taught us something new about survival. Every defeat has made us stronger. Every victory has shown us what's possible when humans refuse to give up. He gestured toward the tactical displays showing the ongoing battles across Earth. You came here expecting to fight the American military or the British military or the Russian military. Instead, you're fighting something that has never existed before in human history. You're fighting all of humanity united against a common enemy. The alien commanders exchanged uncertain glances. This concept was difficult for them to grasp. In their experience, species that fought among themselves were easier to conquer, not harder. Observe, Morrison said, pointing to a display showing coordinated attacks across multiple continents. Right now, American Marines are using tactics developed by Vietnamese guerrillas 50 years ago. British forces are employing strategies first used by Afghan fighters against Soviet invaders. Japanese defenders are adapting methods that Chinese resistance fighters used against Japanese occupation forces decades ago. General Morthak from Tokyo made a sound of disbelief. You claim that humans are learning from past conflicts against each other. This is impossible. Species do not share military knowledge with former enemies. Humans do, Morrison replied simply. Because we understand something you don't. When facing extinction, old enemies become new allies. Former tactics become shared weapons. Yesterday's defeats become tomorrow's victories. As if to prove his point, reports began flooding in from the surface that demonstrated this unprecedented cooperation. In New York, Russian Special Forces veterans were training American civilians in urban warfare techniques. In London, former IRA fighters were teaching British soldiers how to build improvised explosives. In Tokyo, Chinese military advisors were helping Japanese forces plan defensive strategies. Captain Jake Morrison continued his explanation, knowing that each word was changing how the aliens viewed their enemy. You see weakness in our need for sleep, food, and water. but you don't understand the strength that comes from fighting for something greater than yourself. He pointed to footage of human resistance fighters. That Marine hasn't slept in 3 days because he's protecting a school full of children. That civilian hasn't eaten in 2 days because she gave her food to wounded soldiers. That soldier is fighting with a broken arm because his unit needs every fighter they can get. The aliens had been programmed to think in terms of efficiency and logic. The idea that physical weakness could somehow translate into combat strength was completely foreign to them. Furthermore, Morrison said, you made a critical error in your invasion strategy. You targeted our cities, thinking that controlling population centers would break our resistance. But humans don't fight for buildings or governments. We fight for each other. On the surface, this truth was playing out in ways the aliens had never anticipated. In Chicago, Colonel Steve Barnes was leading his growing resistance cell in their largest operation yet. What had started as a desperate group of survivors had grown into a force of over 500 fighters, including regular military, National Guard, police officers, and armed civilians. Target analysis complete, reported. Lisa Chun, a former intelligence analyst who had joined the resistance after her government office was destroyed. The aliens have concentrated their forces around the Willis Tower, using it as a command center. They think the height gives them a strategic advantage. Barnes studied the tactical maps spread across the table in their underground hideout. They're thinking like aliens, not like humans. They see a tall building and think about commanding terrain. We see a tall building and think about structural weak points. The plan Barnes had developed was audacious even by human standards. Instead of attacking the alien forces directly, they would target the building's foundation and support structure. A simultaneous assault would bring down the entire tower, eliminating the alien command post and demonstrating to the invaders that nowhere on Earth was safe for them. Casualties? Asked Dr. Mike Rodriguez, who had become the group's chief medical officer. High, Barnes admitted, but necessary. The aliens need to understand that we will sacrifice anything, destroy anything, to drive them off our planet. This willingness to sacrifice everything was perhaps the most alien concept the invaders had encountered. Their own species valued preservation above all else. The idea of deliberately destroying valuable infrastructure to achieve a military objective was incomprehensible to them. Back on the command ship, Morrison was reaching the climax of his explanation. You want to know why human resistance is growing stronger instead of weaker? It's because every attack you make, every human you kill, every building you destroy proves to every human on Earth that you're not here to conquer us. You're here to exterminate us. Commander Vextar had been listening with growing unease. You exaggerate. We seek conquest, not extermination. Humans who surrender will be allowed to live under our rule. Morrison laughed bitterly. You still don't understand. Humans would rather die free than live as slaves. You're not offering us life, you're offering us a different kind of death. And when humans face that choice, we choose to take as many enemies with us as possible. As if summoned by his words, reports began arriving from all 4 invasion zones. In New York, Amy Parker's forces had successfully destroyed the alien command post in the Empire State Building, using captured alien weapons to collapse the structure from within. In London, resistance fighters had flooded the Thames Tunnel system, drowning an entire alien battalion in the underground maze. In Tokyo, defenders had triggered a massive industrial explosion that eliminated 3 alien supply depots simultaneously, but it was the report from Chicago that truly demonstrated Morrison's point. Colonel Barnes had succeeded in bringing down the Willis Tower, but the cost had been enormous. Half of his force had died in the operation, including Barnes himself. Yet, even as they died, the human fighters had continued to fight, ensuring that every alien in the building died with them. General Crixana S. Wings trembled as she processed the casualty reports. This is madness. They are destroying themselves to hurt us. This behavior serves no logical purpose. It serves the most logical purpose there is, Morrison replied. Survival of the species. Every alien we kill is one less alien threatening human children. Every alien base we destroy is one less staging area for attacks on human families. Every sacrifice we make brings victory closer. The alien commanders were beginning to understand the true scope of what they faced. This was not a conventional military operation against a rival government. This was a species war against an entire civilization that refused to be conquered. Captain Morgula's voice bubbled with desperation. What do you suggest? How can this conflict be resolved? Morrison looked around at the assembled alien leaders. Seeing the fear and uncertainty in their expressions, you have two choices. You can continue this invasion and watch your forces be destroyed piece by an enemy that will never surrender. Or you can leave now while you still have forces left to retreat with? Commander Vextar's pride rebelled against the suggestion. We have superior technology, superior numbers. We can still win this war. No, Morrison said quietly, you can't. Because this isn't a war anymore. It's become something else. It's become a test of whether humans deserve to exist as a free species. And humans will pass that test, no matter what it costs. The reports from the surface continued to support Morrison's words. Human resistance was not weakening despite 3 weeks of constant fighting. Instead, it was evolving, adapting, and growing stronger. Alien casualties had reached critical levels, with over 300,000 dead and countless more wounded or missing. More importantly, human forces were beginning to turn captured alien technology into weapons of their own design. Hybrid weapons that combined human ingenuity with alien technology were appearing on battlefields around the world. Improvised defenses using alien energy shields were protecting human positions. Communication systems built from captured alien equipment were coordinating resistance operations globally. The technological advantage that had made the invasion seem inevitable was disappearing as humans proved their ability to adapt and improve any technology they encountered. Commander Vextar stared at the tactical displays showing his crumbling invasion force. Red indicators showed massive alien casualties.